October 26 to 2023. 2:47 a.m. The symphony of the seas glides through open water when a woman's scream cuts through the hum of the engines. 1 second she's there, fighting, pleading. The next, she's gone. The man beside her doesn't shout, doesn't call for help. He wipes his arm, checks the railing, and vanishes down the corridor before the security lights flicker back on. 5 days later, the sea will give up what he thought it buried. Before we go any further, before we reveal the footage that changed everything, hit subscribe and tap the bell. Every click helps us tell the stories powerful people wish you'd forget. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a warning. Now let's go back to how the nightmare began. Austin, Texas, January 15th, 2021. The clock above the diner hums with the same tired rhythm it always has, flickering fluorescent light over chipped countertops and steaming mugs. Madison Crawford wipes down the same booth she's cleaned for 3 years, her reflection faint in the window. Outside, the Texas night hums with passing trucks and the occasional laugh from a bar down the street. She's 28, but the exhaustion in her bones feels older. Her mother, Linda, is halfway through another night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. Madison texts her before leaving. Headed home, don't forget to eat something. The message delivers, but there's no reply. It's routine. Love between them isn't loud, it's the quiet kind built on shared fatigue. She drives home in her old Corolla, the dashboard light dim, the passenger seat full of thrift store clothes she plans to sell online. When she gets home, she sets up her cracked phone on a ring light and records a short video. A thrift haul. Her voice cheerful, her smile practiced. She edits it on her couch, uploads it to her small YouTube channel, and watches the view count climb overnight. It's not much, but it's something. By spring, she's built a modest following, a few thousand people who see her as the girl who makes life look possible. She films travel tips on weekends, turning gas money into content. Her username, Maddie in Texas, becomes her little badge of hope. To her audience, she's confident, creative, thriving. But off-camera, she's just trying to survive. Her mother doesn't understand the influencer world, but she supports it anyway. If it makes you happy, baby, just be smart about it, Linda says, folding scrubs at the kitchen table. Madison smiles, promising she will. She means it. By fall 2021, a few of her videos start to go viral. One on budget travel, another on building confidence. Her laugh, her accent, her warmth, they make people trust her. Small brands start reaching out, sending free clothes, gift cards, emails that make her feel seen. It's still not enough to quit her job, but for the first time, she feels like she's building something real. Then, one night in late November 2021, she gets an email that changes everything. The subject line reads, Dubai Influencer Summit 2022, official invitation. She opens it, half expecting it to be spam, but it's real. Verified logos, signed sponsorship details, a first-class flight. We've been following your content. It reads, Your authenticity represents the future of digital storytelling. We'd love to have you join us. She reads it twice, then calls her best friend Tara. You're not going to believe this, she laughs. They want me to go to Dubai. Tara's voice on the other end is cautious. Girl, please tell me this isn't one of those fake schemes. Madison cross-checks everything, every sender, every link. It all checks out. 2 months later, January 2022, she lands in Dubai. The air hits her like heat wrapped in perfume. The skyline glows like something from a dream. Glass towers shimmering above golden sand. The influencer summit is dazzling. High-end brands, champagne, camera flashes, and people who treat their lives like curated art. Madison feels small, out of place, but alive. She stands near the edge of a marble hallway, filming quietly for her vlog. She doesn't notice the man watching her, at least not right away. Sheik Khalid bin Abdullah Al Rashid. 52. Tall, controlled, heir to one of the region's largest oil dynasties. Power follows him the way light follows the sun. Yet his eyes settle on the woman in the floral dress filming with an old phone, smiling like she doesn't know the world is watching. Later that evening, he approaches her during a gala dinner. His tone is gentle, measured, practiced. You're Madison? Yes, the American. She nods, a little startled. How do you know me? His smile is slow, confident. I watched your videos. You remind me of what people used to be before everything became performance. She laughs softly, unsure whether it's a compliment, but his gaze is steady and she feels herself blush. They talk. About Texas, about her mother, about small things that don't seem to matter but somehow do. He remembers every detail she shares, her love for photography, her dream of owning a camera, her favorite diner milkshake flavor. His attention feels like gravity, quiet and irresistible. At the end of the night, he says, "You have something rare. Most people here want to be seen. You already are." It's a simple line, but it lodges somewhere deep inside her. That night, Madison sits on her hotel balcony overlooking the city, scrolling through photos of the event. She hesitates over one. Khalid in the background, speaking to a group, his presence commanding even in stillness. She doesn't post it. Instead, she uploads a picture of the skyline with the caption, "Dreams feel different when they finally start to look real." When Madison boarded her flight back to Austin after the Dubai influencer event in January 2022, she wasn't the same woman who had left Texas. She stared at her reflection in the plane window, bare-faced, tired, hair pulled into a loose bun, and wondered if the version of her that Khalid saw was the real her, or if she had stepped into someone else's world for a weekend. But his messages didn't stop. They came steadily, predictably, almost rhythmically, as though he'd mapped out the exact intervals at which she would crave attention. "Did you land safely? Drink water, Texas girl. You never hydrate enough. Send me a photo of your smile." No man had ever noticed her habits like this. Not the boys she dated in high school, not the men who flirted with her at the diner, not even the followers who adored her online. But he noticed everything. He remembered everything. In the weeks that followed, his presence filled the cracks of her life. He asked about her thrift videos. He wanted to know her camera settings, her editing routines, her posting schedule. He sent long voice notes, his voice low and steady, weaving between care and authority. Madison didn't realize it yet, but every question he asked subtly rearranged her priorities. Every compliment rooted her deeper into the soil of his attention. By late February, he was suggesting brand collaborations to her. International ones she never would have dreamed of. "You should work with higher-tier companies," he told her. "Your talent is wasted on small deals." And then he would make an introduction. A manager, a consultant, a stylist. None of them were chosen by her. All of them were chosen for her. Her following grew faster than ever. One video, boosted by one of his strategically placed contacts, went viral across the Middle East. She gained 50,000 followers in a single week. She called Tyra laughing, breathless. "I don't know what's happening. Everything is moving so fast." Tyra teased her, but her tone was cautious. "Just stay grounded, okay? Men like him don't appear out of nowhere." Madison brushed it off. "He's helping me because he believes in me." But belief wasn't what he was giving her. It was direction. When he invited her back to Dubai in March for a content project, she panicked at first. She didn't have money for another flight, and she didn't want to ask her mother for help. Khalid laughed gently when she told him, "You think I'd let a plane ticket stop you? Come. I'll handle everything." The email confirmation arrived 5 minutes later. On her second visit, he greeted her at the airport himself. He wore a navy thobe and dark sunglasses, and when he hugged her, she felt the scent of his cologne settle into her clothes. It disarmed her. It felt like coming home to a place she had never lived. He took her to restaurants with tables carved from marble and ceilings dripping with gold. He taught her how to order dishes she couldn't pronounce. He introduced her to people with last names that unlocked doors across continents. They treated her with respect, not because of who she was, but because of who she was with. One night, they sat in a rooftop lounge overlooking Dubai's skyline, the city glowing like a galaxy. Madison looked overwhelmed. Khalid smiled softly. "You belong to a world bigger than Austin," he told her. "You just needed someone to open the door." That was the first time she felt something shift inside her. Something that whispered he wasn't just helping, he was steering. When she returned to Texas again, the diner felt too loud, too bright, too plain. Taking orders, refilling cups, listening to customers complain about undercooked eggs, none of it felt like the life she was supposed to live anymore. She filmed a video titled "Chasing Dreams Even When They Scare You," and mentioned nothing of the man who had made those dreams suddenly feel reachable. By April, She had stopped picking up extra shifts. By May, she had quit the job entirely. Khalid praised her. "Finally," he said over the phone. "Now you can focus on becoming who you're meant to be." It didn't occur to her that the girl she was meant to be was slowly becoming whichever version he carved for her. He wasn't loud about it. His influence came in soft edges rather than sharp commands. In June, he gifted her a vintage camera. "This reminds me of your soul," he wrote in a note tucked inside the box. "Classic, rare, worth protecting." Her hands shook when she read it. No one had ever described her that way. She filmed her unboxing, careful not to mention who the gift was from. Khalid didn't want credit. He wanted control. July brought more gifts. Designer dresses, diamond earrings, silk robes she wasn't sure were meant to be worn or admired. He told her she deserved luxury because she worked so hard. But slowly, he began to question her collaborations. "Why are you doing ads for cheap products? You're above that now." She stopped accepting small brand offers. "You shouldn't be traveling alone," he warned her when she mentioned wanting to film in New York. "Let me arrange something safer." She canceled the trip. "You need a better manager," he told her. "Someone I trust." Her new manager was a man she'd never met but who called Khalid Sir. Every boundary she ceded felt reasonable. Protective, loving. But step by step, she became a project, not a partner. While her digital world expanded, her real world shrank. By late summer 2022, she rarely spoke to Tara. Her mother's calls went unanswered more often than not. She missed birthdays, family dinners, even simple coffee dates. When Tara texted, "Are you okay? You're disappearing," Madison replied, "I'm just busy." But Madison wasn't busy. She was isolated, wrapped in silk, fed with compliments, distracted by beauty, blindfolded by attention. When she visited Dubai again in August, Khalid moved her into a second apartment, one she didn't choose, didn't decorate, and didn't question. "It was temporary," he said, "just until we find a place that suits your brand." But she stayed there for months. He visited often at first, brought her dinner, kicked off his shoes and lay on the couch with his head in her lap. He'd tell her stories about ruling families, oil negotiations, political alliances. She didn't understand most of it, but she listened because he spoke about his world like it was a kingdom, and she was being granted entry. When she laughed at something he said, he watched her with a quiet hunger. She thought it was love. It was possession. The cracks began subtly. One night, she mentioned wanting to post a photo of his hand near hers at a restaurant. Nothing revealing, just a soft hint. His expression darkened instantly. "No," he said. "Absolutely not." "Why?" she asked gently. "Because the moment people know about us, you will no longer be safe." She dropped the subject, but her spirit dimmed. She wondered why love had to live in the shadows. Another time, she planned to surprise him at one of his business events. When she told him, he touched her cheek lightly and said, "Sweetheart, you're emotional. That's one of the things I adore about you. But let's not confuse love with impulsiveness." She canceled the surprise. It dawned on her slowly. Khalid wanted her to be close enough to touch, but far enough to hide. In September, her mother asked to visit again. Madison hesitated before replying. "Maybe later," she said. "Things are hectic." What she meant was, "I don't know how to explain this life to you." What she feared was, "You might see something I'm trying not to see." In October, Khalid took her to Santorini again, but this time, without friends. The trip was a whirlwind of luxury rooftops, lavender sunsets, quiet dinners overlooking the water. He held her waist as they walked through narrow streets, whispering to her in Arabic endearments she didn't fully understand but loved hearing. She felt safe there, wrapped in salt air and warmth. But even in paradise, his eyes changed sometimes. Flat, calculating, as if she were not a woman he loved, but an investment he was assessing. On the last night of the trip, she caught him staring at her reflection in the mirror. Something about the silence made her heart pound. She turned, smiling nervously. "What?" He walked over, brushing her hair back. "You're perfect," he murmured. His tone should have comforted her. Instead, it chilled her. The next morning, he was back to laughing, planning, promising. Her unease dissolved under his charm like sugar in hot tea. When she returned to Dubai, her world shrank further. He introduced limits gently, almost lovingly. "You shouldn't walk outside alone this late. You post too much for strangers. Save some parts of your life for me." You're trusting people who haven't earned it. You're happiest when you're with me. You said that yourself. She hadn't said that exactly, but he said it so confidently she believed she must have. Her identity, once defined by her passion and independence, became entangled entirely with him. His moods became the weather of her days. When he was warm, she bloomed. When he was cold, she wilted. She didn't see it happening. Control rarely arrives as force. It arrives as comfort. By winter 2022, Madison could barely remember a day that wasn't shaped by Khalid's voice, his guidance, his influence. When he complimented her videos, she soared. When he criticized them, she redid everything. When he texted late at night, she answered instantly. When he didn't, she stayed awake waiting. In early 2023, she traveled with him to Istanbul for a weekend. They walked through crowded bazaars, his hand firm at the small of her back, guiding her. She loved the way he looked at her there, protective, proud, like she belonged at his side. But one evening, she met a group of his business contacts. They greeted Khalid warmly but barely acknowledged her, eyes sliding past her as if she were a shadow. He didn't correct them, didn't introduce her, didn't hold her hand. It hurt more than she let herself admit. Later that night, curled beside him in bed, she whispered, "Do they know about me?" His reply was soft, almost pitying. "This world is delicate. We must be careful." She nodded, but inside, something cracked. Still, she stayed, because by then, leaving felt impossible. He was her anchor, her future, her promise, her everything. She didn't see the truth, not yet, that the deeper he pulled her into his world, the further he separated her from everyone who could save her. She didn't realize she was slowly becoming an extension of his identity, not a partner in his life. She didn't see how each sacrifice chipped away pieces of the girl from Austin until she was almost unrecognizable. She didn't see that a man who requires secrecy is not building a life with you. He's hiding one from you. She didn't see that his love came with terms she never agreed to. She didn't see that the same arms she trusted to hold her were capable of lifting her into the dark. Not yet. Not until it was too late. By February 2023, almost a year after she first met Khalid, Madison had settled into a rhythm she would have once thought belonged to someone else's life. Mornings in her Dubai apartment began with sunlight pouring across marble floors, the city humming beneath her balcony like a living thing. She'd wake slowly, drifting between reality and some softer dream where everything felt earned instead of given. For a few quiet seconds after opening her eyes, she believed she had built this life entirely on her own. The partnerships, the travel invitations, the high-rise apartment, the glow her followers admired. Then her phone would buzz, and reality would slip back into place. "Good morning, my star. Breathe deeply today. I want you calm." The message always came before she even got out of bed. Sometimes she wondered if he timed it deliberately. Sometimes she wondered why his words felt like permission slips. But she never said that out loud. She would stare at the text a moment before typing back something light, something sweet, something that made him smile. It wasn't that she was afraid of disappointing him, not yet. It was that his approval had become the air she breathed. She had grown accustomed to the way he shaped her days and softened her doubts with tenderness that felt tailor-made for her. By mid-morning, her apartment buzzed with the small rituals of her influencer life. Ring lights glowing, clothing racks crowded with sponsored outfits, her camera perched on a tripod like a patient friend. Her audience loved this new version of her, confident, polished, radiant. They didn't see the missing pieces. They didn't see how deeply she missed the comfort of her mother's kitchen, the smell of diner coffee, the sound of Tara's laugh. They saw the glow, not the loneliness behind it. She spent March traveling with Khalid more often. Weekend trips to Abu Dhabi, a brief stay in Muscat, quick visits to boutique hotels that paid her handsomely to post a smiling photo on a balcony. Everywhere they went, people recognized him. Staff bowed slightly, whispered his name, held doors open before he even reached them. He moved through these spaces like someone born to occupy them. Madison followed, trying not to trip over the invisible expectations swirling around him. In private, he praised her modesty, her humility, her grace. In public, he acted as though she were a secret he intended to treasure quietly. She tried not to take it personally. There were days when he was softer than silk, laying his head in her lap, asking her to read to him while he closed his eyes, letting her trace the faint creases at the corners of his smile. Those were the moments she held closest, the ones she replayed while editing videos late at night. She recorded voice notes for Tara that she never sent. Messages to her mother she deleted before hitting send. She wasn't hiding him. She was hiding the uncertainty she couldn't name. Late one evening, after they returned from a dinner overlooking the marina, she walked barefoot across the apartment and realized that almost everything she owned now had somehow come from him. The couch, the gold-framed mirror leaning against the wall, the dresses neatly hung in her closet, even the slippers beneath her feet. She paused, touching the strap of a handbag he had gifted her during their Rome trip last year. Something inside her tugged. Nostalgia, maybe, or longing for the version of herself who used to work doubles at the diner and dream of buying just one nice purse. She pushed the feeling down. Gratitude was easier than introspection. Around this time, her page hit 200,000 followers. She filmed a thank you video, her voice warm, her eyes shining. "I'm so grateful," she said, clasping her hands together. "This community changed my life." Only she knew how much of that statement was true and how much wasn't. In April 2023, Khalid invited her to accompany him to a private function for business partners and dignitaries. It wasn't a glamorous gala. It was more formal, more political, the kind of gathering where handshakes carried the weight of contracts. She chose a beige silk dress, nervous but excited. When she stepped out of the bedroom, he looked her up and down with an expression she had never seen before. Not admiration, not love, but assessment. And he didn't take her. At the last minute, as they were heading to the elevator, he stopped sharply. "Actually," he said, his tone suddenly clipped, "it's better if you stay home tonight. These people prefer their worlds uncomplicated." The word stung. She kept her expression neutral, nodded, and told him it was fine. She understood. But when the door shut behind him, leaving her alone in a room he chose, surrounded by things he bought, illuminated by lights he paid for, something inside her whispered a truth she wasn't ready to face. She wasn't his partner. She was his possession. She slept poorly that night. When he returned after midnight, smelling faintly of cologne and cigar smoke, he kissed her cheek and said, "Don't pout, Madison. Tonight wasn't for you. I'll make it up to you." The next morning, a Cartier bracelet appeared on her dresser. She wore it gladly. In May, her mother fell ill and was hospitalized briefly. Madison found out 3 days after the fact. Her phone had been on silent because she'd spent a long weekend with Khalid in a mountain resort several hours from the city. When she finally reached Linda, her mother tried to downplay everything. "It was just dehydration, baby. I didn't want to bother you." Madison cried after hanging up, not because her mother was sick, but because she didn't recognize herself in that moment. The girl who once rushed across town when her mother had a headache had become the woman who didn't check her phone for days. She told Khalid she wanted to visit Texas, just for a week, just to make sure her mother was okay. He didn't say no. He simply asked her to wait until after things settle. What things meant, she wasn't sure. And she didn't press. Every time she opened her mouth to ask questions, his tone shifted just slightly, a gentle tightening that signaled she was approaching a boundary she wasn't supposed to cross. So she stayed. She filmed, she smiled, and she missed her mother quietly. June brought new sponsorships. Luxury brands reached out now, offering her clothing worth more than her rent back in Texas. High-end hotels wanted her in their suites. Beauty brands wanted her face in their campaigns. Madison felt pride, genuine pride, even though she knew the connections that brought her these offers weren't entirely hers. Still, she posted. She wore the gowns, she accepted the invitations. She felt adored by the world even as her world grew smaller. Khalid was attentive in ways that felt intoxicating. He noticed when her voice was softer than usual. He noticed when she was tired. He noticed when she used her pink lipstick instead of her nude one. He noticed when she forgot lunch. He noticed everything. It felt like love. It wasn't. In July, she overheard a conversation he had with someone on speakerphone. He spoke rapidly in Arabic, tone sharp, controlled. She didn't understand all the words, but she knew her name when she heard it. After he ended the call, she asked gently, "Was that about me?" He smiled, dismissive. Business, my love. Nothing for you to worry about. The way he said it made her feel foolish for asking. That night, she dreamed she was running through her old neighborhood in Austin, barefoot on cracked pavement, her breath tight. She didn't know what she was running from. She just knew she couldn't stop. She woke before dawn, heart racing, and found him watching her, not with concern, with curiosity. Bad dream? He asked softly. She nodded. Come here, he said, opening his arm. She moved toward him without thinking. Later that month, he began suggesting she cut ties with certain friends. They don't understand your new life, he said. They'll only pull you back into who you used to be. When she argued lightly, his silence became a wall. She hated how quickly she climbed over it by agreeing. In August, she finally booked a flight to Texas without telling him ahead of time. She wasn't trying to defy him, she just wanted to see her mother. When she told him over dinner, he stared at her for a long moment, then set down his fork slowly. Why didn't you ask me first? He said, the way someone might ask a child why they wandered into the street. She blinked. I didn't think I needed permission. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hand on the table. He didn't show anger in any obvious way. Instead, he smiled, a tight, controlled smile that did more damage than shouting ever could. Madison, he murmured, you know how vulnerable you are on your own. I protect you, that's what I do. If something happened to you. He didn't finish the sentence, but the silence afterward was loud. She canceled the trip. She told her mother she would visit next month. Next month became the month after that. Then the month after that. And then she stopped committing to dates altogether. Her mother didn't push. But moms don't need to push to know when something is wrong. As summer melted into fall, the illusion of stability grew stronger, even as the foundation beneath it eroded. Their routines deepened. Their conversations became intimate in ways she had always fantasized about. Plans for the future, quiet jokes, confessions about her childhood, talks about forever. In late September 2023, he surprised her with a weekend getaway to a secluded mountain villa. The drive there was long and peaceful. The kind of silence that feels like a shared language. When they arrived, he led her to a private balcony overlooking endless forest. She gasped at the view. He watched her reaction with pride, but not the pride of a partner. The pride of someone who crafted the moment exactly to provoke that response. That night, wrapped in blankets beside a fire, he told her, "You are the most peaceful part of my life." She closed her eyes, letting the words settle into her bones like warmth. She held on to that sentence for weeks afterward. He said it again a few days later, not with tenderness, but with ownership. "You are my peace. Not I love you, not you matter to me. You are mine." The difference mattered. She just didn't see it yet. Throughout October, she felt him shifting subtly, moods tightening, questions growing sharper, his presence oscillating between tender and distant. Some days, he was affectionate, running his fingers through her hair, telling her stories about growing up among royalty, asking what kind of house she wanted to live in someday. Other days, he withdrew into himself, pacing, distracted, tense, as though he were doing math in his head that she wasn't allowed to see. And then there were the moments when she'd catch him watching her. Not lovingly, but analytically. As if she were a variable he couldn't quite control completely. As if he were weighing risk against reward. Those moments frightened her. They were brief, flashes that disappeared the instant she blinked. But they left her heart pounding. When she asked gently, "Are you okay?" he always kissed her and said, "Perfect. You calm me." That reassurance would wash away the unease, for a few hours, sometimes a day, never longer. The truth was this. Madison believed she had found forever. She believed she was building a life with a man who adored her, lifted her, protected her. She believed isolation was simply intimacy. She believed control was simply care. She believed secrecy was simply love's shield. She didn't understand that she was living inside the emotional equivalent of a glass cage, beautiful, transparent, and inescapable. To her, Khalid was the answer to every childhood ache. To him, Madison was a chapter in a life where everything existed to serve his needs. She didn't know that the love she felt was real. And the love he felt was conditional. She didn't know that the more she surrendered, the more he assessed. She didn't know that her obedience made her valuable, and her independence made her dangerous. She didn't know that forever meant something very different to a man who believed peace was something you create, control, and when necessary, eliminate. But she would learn. Not yet. Not here. Not in the warmth of his arms or the comfort of silk sheets. Her lesson would come later. In the cold, in the dark, under a sky she never got to describe in her next video. For now, Madison believed in forever, and that belief was the most dangerous part of all. The morning it happened did not feel like the beginning of a life-changing day. It felt ordinary, quiet, soft, too still for the storm waiting beneath the surface. Madison woke slowly, blinking against the warm Dubai sunlight stretching across her sheets. She lay there for a moment, listening to the distant hum of traffic, the low swirl of the air conditioner, the familiar quiet of a home that had become both sanctuary and cage. When she finally sat up, her stomach twisted sharply. She pressed her palm against it, frowning. Maybe she hadn't eaten enough the night before. Maybe she was dehydrated. Maybe stress was catching up to her. She stood, but the room tilted slightly, and she caught herself on the dresser. A strange heaviness settled low in her abdomen. Not pain, just something. She walked to the bathroom, rubbing her temples. The mirror caught her reflection. Pale, unfocused, eyes rimmed with exhaustion she couldn't explain. She splashed water on her face, breathing slowly, trying to anchor herself. Then a thought, small, uninvited, broke through. Her period. She froze. She mentally traced dates, counted backward, counted again. Her pulse quickened. No, she whispered to herself. I'm on the pill. And she was, every single day, same time, same alarm on her phone. Khalid even knew. He'd once seen the pack in her bag and teased her gently for being too responsible. She remembered smiling, telling him it was just part of taking care of herself. She opened the cabinet beneath the sink, pulling out a pregnancy test she had bought months ago just to have, back when her life still felt somewhat predictable. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. She tried to steady her breathing, but fear moved through her body in quick, sharp jolts. She followed the instructions, set the test on the counter, stepped back. The minutes stretched. The air felt too thick, the silence too heavy. When she finally looked down, her heart stopped. 2 pink lines. Her knees buckled, and she slowly lowered herself to the floor, back hitting the cabinet. Tears blurred her vision, not from sadness or joy, but from the sudden weight of something irreversible. She stared at the test until her vision doubled, until she could barely breathe. A child. His child. She touched her stomach, stunned. She thought of her mother. She thought of Texas. She thought of the life she left behind. But mostly, she thought of Khalid. He was on a business trip, somewhere between Riyadh and Doha, attending meetings she didn't fully understand. He had left 2 days earlier, kissing her forehead and promising to return soon. She had barely heard from him since. A few short check-ins, a voice note telling her to rest. Nothing unusual. But this was impossible. She grabbed her phone with numb hands and found his name. Her thumb hovered over the call button as she tried to summon courage. When she pressed it, her breath hitched. He answered on the 3rd ring. Madison. His voice was distant, the background noise muffled, like he had stepped away from a crowd. Her throat tightened. Khalid, I need to tell you something. A pause. What's wrong? Her chest constricted. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was colder than anything she'd ever felt from him. Not confused, not shocked. Cold. Are you sure? He asked finally, and this time the disbelief in his voice wasn't subtle. It was sharp, edged, almost clinical. She swallowed. Yes, I took a test. I know I was careful. You were on the pill, he said, his voice tightening. You told me. I take it every day. I haven't missed a dose. Another long silence. She could almost feel him thinking, calculating, doubting. Khalid, she whispered. Where's the test? He asked. In the bathroom. He exhaled slowly, the way he did when dealing with a problem that required precision, not emotion. Stay home. Do not go anywhere. I'll have my doctor come to you. Her heart thudded. Your doctor? Yes, today? She didn't know what to say, so she nodded even though he couldn't see her. Without another word, he ended the call. She stared at her phone, stunned. He had never hung up so abruptly. She waited for the warmth to return and a follow-up message, waited for reassurance, for anything. But her phone stayed dark. 2 hours later, her intercom buzzed. "Miss Crawford?" a voice said. "Dr. Farouk sent me." She opened the door. A middle-aged man in a suit stood in the hallway, a leather medical bag in hand. His expression was neutral, professional. He stepped inside and gestured toward the living room. "May I?" he asked. She nodded mechanically. He conducted the exam with quiet efficiency, a urine test first, then a blood draw. He worked without small talk, without eye contact, following instructions she wasn't allowed to hear. When he was done, he sat at the dining table and reviewed the results. Madison clutched her hands together, knuckles white. He finally looked at her. "You are 6 to 7 weeks pregnant," he said softly. Her breath caught. "So it's certain?" "It is." He closed his bag, stood, and gave her a small nod before leaving. No congratulations, no sympathy, just the sterile procession of protocol. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. The doctor confirmed it. "No, how are you feeling?" "No, we'll figure this out." "No, talk to me." Nothing but confirmation. She typed back, "Can we talk?" He didn't respond. The weight of his silence wrapped around her like ice. The rest of the day passed in slow, jagged fragments. She tried to eat but couldn't swallow. She tried to lie down but couldn't get comfortable. She wandered through the apartment, picking up objects without seeing them, forgetting to put them back. When night finally came, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every time her phone buzzed with a notification, her heart leapt, only to sink again when it wasn't him. She thought about calling her mother, but what would she say? She couldn't bear the sound of disappointment or worry in Linda's voice. She couldn't explain the complexities of a relationship built in a world so far from Austin it felt like another planet. She was alone. She prayed he would call. He didn't. On the second day, morning sickness hit hard. She barely made it to the bathroom before retching. Every sound felt too loud. Every smell made her stomach churn. She clung to the sink, tears streaming down her face, not because of the nausea, but because she had imagined this moment differently. She had imagined joy, tenderness, a hand on her back, a voice in her ear telling her they would figure it out. Instead, she had a cold countertop beneath her palms and a silence that hollowed her out from the inside. She tried calling him that evening. The phone rang, then cut to voicemail. She texted, "I'm scared, please call me." He replied hours later, "I'm busy, we'll talk soon." Soon. That word again, that maddening word that promised nothing. On day 3, she left the apartment only to stand in the hallway, her hand on the door handle, unable to step farther. Something inside her feared he might call, and she'd miss the chance to fix everything. Something inside her also feared what this meant, that he didn't trust her, didn't believe her, didn't want this child, didn't want her. She returned to the couch and curled into herself. By day 4, she no longer bothered with makeup. She canceled brand meetings. She ignored partnership emails. She sat at the window for hours, watching life move outside while hers remained frozen. Every vibration of her phone felt like electricity. Every silence felt like punishment. And then, finally, his name lit up her screen. Her breath hitched. She answered immediately. "Khalid?" His voice was calm, controlled. Too controlled. "Madison." She nearly sobbed with relief. "Can we please talk? I need to see you." "We will. When I return." "When is that?" "Soon." She closed her eyes. "I'm not asking for anything from you. You don't have to acknowledge the baby. I'll go back to Texas. I'll raise the child alone. No one ever has to know it's yours. Your name will never be attached to this, I swear it." A long pause. Then, "We will talk in person." It wasn't comfort. It wasn't reassurance. It wasn't even agreement. But she grabbed onto it like a lifeline. "Okay," she whispered. When the call ended, she curled onto the couch, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She thought about everything they'd shared. The dinners, the late-night laughter, the promises whispered against her skin. She thought of the man who held her face in his hands and told her she was his peace. She thought of the future she had built in her imagination, a future she still clung to despite the cracks forming beneath her feet. He loved her. She believed that. She had to. Because the alternative, that she was alone in this, felt too heavy to bear. On day 5, she woke expecting nausea, but instead felt a strange calmness. Maybe he was just scared. Maybe the pregnancy would bring them closer. Maybe they'd find a way to make it work. She clung to that hope like oxygen. She walked to the balcony, staring at the horizon as if answers lived there. The breeze carried the faint scent of sea salt. She pressed her palm to her belly. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay. He just needs time." Her phone buzzed. "Come to the villa tomorrow, afternoon." Her heart soared, relief breaking through her like light. Tomorrow. He wanted to see her. He wasn't abandoning her. He hadn't changed. He just needed space, that was all. Stress, pressure, business, love survived worse things. She stared at her reflection in the balcony glass and tried to see the woman he fell for. Tried to see strength instead of fear. Tried to see hope instead of dread. She imagined him walking through the door. She imagined him cupping her face in his hands. She imagined him whispering, "We'll make this work. Tomorrow would fix everything. Tomorrow would bring clarity. Tomorrow would bring love back to its center." She pressed the test stick into a drawer, wiped her tears, and whispered one last time, "He loves me. He'll come around. He always does." But love built on control is not love. And tomorrow has a way of revealing the truth no one wants to face. The next afternoon, Madison arrived at the villa with her heart pounding hard enough that she felt it in her throat. She had barely slept the night before, turning over every possible outcome, every possible version of the conversation they were about to have. The air around the villa was warm, dry, smelling faintly of jasmine from the garden. She smoothed her dress, fixed her hair in the reflection of the sliding glass door, and whispered under her breath, "This is going to work. It has to." The moment she stepped inside, she saw him standing near the window, sunlight outlining his silhouette in sharp gold. Khalid turned slowly, his expression unreadable at first, then softening into a practiced smile. "Madison," he said, as though her name were a formality. She exhaled in relief, nearly collapsing into his arms when he stepped forward. He held her gently, but not tightly, not the way he used to. His hands rested on her back with a careful restraint, like someone handling something expensive, not necessarily precious. Still, she inhaled his cologne and let the familiarity soothe her. When she pulled back slightly, he brushed a thumb across her cheek. "You look tired," he murmured. She laughed weakly. "It's been a lot." "Yes," he agreed, "for both of us." They sat in the living room, but the conversation didn't unfold the way she expected. She imagined apologies, tears, promises. Instead, he remained composed, his tone calm, diplomatic almost. He asked about her symptoms, her health, whether she had eaten that morning. He didn't ask how she felt emotionally or whether she was scared or what she needed from him. Every question was clinical. She tried to bridge the distance. "Khalid, we can figure this out. I don't want anything from you. I just want us." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he masked it with a small smile. "I know," he said, "and I appreciate your loyalty." Loyalty. The word unsettled her, but she pushed the feeling down. After a long silence, he stood abruptly. "We need a change of scenery," he said. She blinked. "What do you mean?" He crossed to the desk and handed her a printed confirmation. At the top, in elegant navy font, were the words, "Symphony of the Seas, Mediterranean Voyage." "A cruise?" she whispered. "Yes. A week at sea. Away from pressure, away from noise. We need quiet to talk through everything." He touched her shoulder gently. "Just you and me." Relief washed over her so hard her eyes stung. A vacation. Time alone, a chance to breathe, to reconnect, to rebuild. This is perfect," she said, voice trembling. "Thank you." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Pack light," he said. "We leave tomorrow." The next day, she packed slowly. Her favorite sundress, a few comfortable outfits, her skincare bag, the vintage camera he gave her last year, and a notebook she hadn't written in for months. As she folded her clothes, she placed a hand over her stomach. She imagined showing him the first ultrasound, imagined their baby with his eyes and her smile, imagined telling her mother everything was okay. She let herself dream again. At the port, Khalid kept a low profile. A cap pulled low over his brow. Sunglasses. His security detail discreetly trailing behind at a distance until they reached the ship's gate. Madison didn't mind. She thought it was romantic, him choosing to travel with her, keeping their world private, choosing intimacy over spectacle. The ship was breathtakingly massive. Floors of glass, marble, lights shimmering under the Mediterranean sun. Couples laughed as they boarded. Children pointed at the water below. Older passengers chatted about excursions and evening shows. For a moment, Madison felt normal. Just another woman on vacation with the man she loved. Their suite was luxurious. Plush carpets, a balcony overlooking the sea, a bathroom larger than her first apartment. Madison ran her fingers along the edge of the bedspread, the custom embroidery in the towels, the fresh orchids arranged on the table. "Khalid," she whispered, turning toward him. "This is beautiful." He nodded. "Only the best. For my peace." The phrase echoed in her chest. She wanted to believe it was love. She needed to believe it. She stepped onto the balcony, the wind brushing her hair back, the sea glowing a deep turquoise beneath the late afternoon sun. "It's so peaceful," she breathed. He stood behind her, hands resting lightly on the railing. "Peace is important," he said quietly. "More than anything." The tone unsettled her, but she didn't look back. The first day passed gently. They explored the ship, its grand corridors, its small boutiques, its glittering dining halls. He walked beside her, close but not quite touching. He answered her questions politely, made small jokes, but she felt a new distance between them. She tried to ignore it. They were both adjusting. This trip was meant to heal the gap. That night, they had dinner in a restaurant overlooking the sea. Soft violin music played in the background. She wore the sundress he once said made her look like a breath of Texas summer. He barely commented on it. Still, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm glad we came," she said. He smiled faintly. "So am I." But something about the way he said it made her wonder if he was speaking to her, or to himself. On the second day, Madison filmed a vlog, just a short one, for her followers. She hadn't posted in weeks and missed the connection. She set her camera on the balcony railing, brushed her hair back, and smiled in that warm, effortless way her audience loved. "Hey guys," she said softly. "I know it's been a minute. I needed some time away. But I'm here now and I'm on a beautiful cruise in the Mediterranean. I feel at peace, like everything is falling into place." She paused, looking out at the sea. "Sometimes you have to step away to remember who you are and what you want." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hoped her audience wouldn't notice. Behind the camera, Khalid watched her, not smiling, not frowning, just observing. She couldn't read him. "Want to say something?" she asked playfully, turning the camera slightly toward him. He lifted a hand in a small wave, lips pressed into a flat, unreadable smile. When she ended the recording, he said nothing. She waited for him to comment, to tease her, to hug her from behind the way he used to. Instead, he checked his watch and excused himself. "I need to make a few calls," he said. "Stay here." She nodded, watching him walk inside. She didn't know that when he reached the bedroom, he locked the balcony door behind her, not for her safety, but for his privacy. Inside, he sat on the edge of the bed and opened a file on his phone, ship schematics he had downloaded quietly the night before. He zoomed in on the deck plans, scrolling through blind spots, entrances, cameras. His face remained impassive, eyes calculating. When he returned to the balcony 20 minutes later, he tucked his phone into his pocket and placed a kiss on her shoulder. "Let's go to dinner," he said. She leaned into him. She needed the closeness. She needed to feel like they were still connected. On the third night, the ship docked briefly in Naples. Passengers flooded the port, excited to explore. Khalid, however, insisted they stay on board. "Too many cameras," he said simply. She didn't question it. She let him order room service, grilled sea bass, rice, lemon sorbet. They ate together on the balcony, the sound of live music drifting up from the decks below. For a moment, Madison felt almost normal again. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he didn't pull away. When she whispered, "I missed this," he murmured, "I know." But even then, his eyes lingered too long on the ocean. By the fourth night, something fragile had formed between them. An illusion of closeness they both pretended was real. Madison clung to it, grateful for every moment where he touched her without hesitation, where he kissed her gently, where he let his hand rest on her lower back. She began to believe the cruise was working. That maybe, despite everything, he would choose her. Choose their child. Choose the life she dreamed of. She held on to that hope tightly. But sometimes she'd wake at 3 a.m. and find him sitting in the dark, staring out the window. She'd call his name softly. He would turn slowly, smile faintly, and say, "Go back to sleep." He never came back to bed right away. On the fifth day, the sea grew calm, stretching endlessly under a pale sky. Madison felt lighter than she had in weeks. She spent the afternoon floating in the pool, her hair glistening in the sun, her laughter echoing as she splashed him playfully. He didn't splash back, but he smiled, and that was enough for her. Later, she lounged beside him, sun-warmed skin against soft towels. "I'm really glad we came," she said. I feel like we're us again." He looked at her for a long moment, expression unreadable. "Yes," he said finally. "Us." She didn't notice the edge in his tone. Hope has a way of muting certain frequencies. That night, after dinner, she suggested they walk the sky deck, her favorite part of the ship. She liked the quiet up there, the open air, the way the sea stretched like a canvas of dark velvet. He hesitated before agreeing. They walked hand in hand, their footsteps soft on the wooden boards. The wind tugged gently at her dress, the air cool against her skin. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. He looked down at her, eyes soft enough to mask the truth beneath. "Good," he said. She kissed him softly, he kissed her back. Then he guided her toward the railing. "Look at how still the water is," he murmured. She smiled, stepping closer to the edge. "It's beautiful." Behind her, he slipped his hand into his pocket. Below them, the Mediterranean waited, quiet, indifferent, endless. Madison closed her eyes, breathing in the salt air, believing, truly believing, that this was the beginning of their healing. She didn't see him study the cameras above them. She didn't see him glance over his shoulder, calculating angles. She didn't see the faint tightening in his jaw. She only felt his fingertips brush her back. It felt tender. It felt loving. It felt safe. And for one fleeting moment, Madison believed she had reclaimed the man she loved. She had no idea the sea was already listening, already watching, already preparing to take her in. By the time they left the sky deck and slipped back into their suite, the softness Madison had clung to all day had begun to unravel, thread by thread. The shift was subtle at first, just a quiet distance in the air, a slight tension in the way he closed the door behind them. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that the night was cold, that he was tired, that they had simply walked too much. But something in his movements had changed. He wasn't rushing, wasn't pacing, wasn't even agitated. He was calm. Too calm. Dinner had ended hours earlier, but the silence between them now felt different from the easy quiet they shared on the balcony or during their long walks. This silence had weight. It had shape. It pushed against her chest as she crossed the room. She showered to ease her nerves, steam filling the small bathroom. As she washed her face, she told herself everything would make sense soon. That he was still adjusting. That the conversation they needed was coming. When she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, she found him sitting on the edge of the bed, head down, as if lost in thought. The low light carved his face into sharp lines. "You okay?" she asked softly, trying to sound gentle, patient. He looked up, his expression controlled. "Fine." She waited for him to ask how she was feeling, to pull her into his arms, to apologize for the distance. He didn't. Instead, he watched her move, his eyes tracking her steps like someone reviewing a performance. She slipped into her white silk nightgown and climbed onto the bed beside him. Their thighs touched, but his body felt still, unmoving. "Can we talk now?" she whispered. "Not yet," he said, the words soft but firm. "Soon." There was finality in that single word, a timing he wasn't ready to share with her. She touched his arm gently. "Khalid, do you trust me?" He looked at her, long and steady. "Do you trust me?" he countered. She swallowed. "Yes." His eyes lingered on her face longer than usual, studying her features as if memorizing them, or assessing them. She couldn't tell. A moment later, he stood abruptly. "Let's get some air." Her breath faltered. "Right now?" "Yes, the deck will be empty." He paused. "We should be alone for this." Something cold slid through her stomach, but he held out his hand, and instinctively, out of love, habit, fear, she took it. They left the suite and walked through hallways bathed in dim, gold light. The ship felt strangely hollow, the late hour muffling every sound. Madison wrapped her arms around herself, the thin nightgown offering little protection from the air that grew cooler with each deck they climbed. "Khalid?" she whispered once. He didn't answer. When they stepped onto the sky deck again, the wind struck her immediately, pulling at her hair, her gown. The sea stretched out in an endless black sheet, reflecting nothing, revealing nothing. The ship seemed to float in a void. She shivered. "It's so cold." He didn't offer his jacket. He simply walked forward, hands in his pockets, until he reached the railing. She followed slowly, her footsteps light, hesitant. The silence wrapped around them like a second skin. "Khalid, why are we here?" she asked. He didn't look at her when he answered. "You said you wanted to talk." "Yes, I do. But here?" He finally turned. His face was blank, not cruel, not angry, just empty in a way that hurt more than rage. "You said you would disappear," he said. She blinked. I meant it. You said you wouldn't become a problem." She felt the word slice through the fragile hope she'd been holding on to. "A problem?" she repeated, her voice small, confused. "Yes. Why would you say that?" she whispered. "I'm not asking you for anything. I swear I'm not." "You told me you're pregnant." She took a shaky breath. "I didn't expect it. I didn't plan it. You know I take the pill." "It doesn't matter." "It does," she cried, stepping closer. "This wasn't something I wanted to burden you with. I told you I'll go back to Texas. I'll raise the baby alone." "You think that's enough?" he asked. She froze. The wind tugged at her gown, the sea whispered below. Somewhere deep inside her chest, fear bloomed. "Khalid, what do you mean? You should not have called me." Her breath hitched. "You answered. I didn't force you to pick up. You told me something I can't afford." The dread settled fully now, solid and suffocating. "Khalid," she begged softly, "please listen to me. I won't say anything, ever. You know me. You know I'm loyal to you. I've never told anyone about us. No one in my life even knows your name. You are still a risk." "No, I'm not. I'll leave tonight if you want. I'll fly to Texas tomorrow morning. I'll disappear completely." Tears spilled down her cheeks, warm against the cold wind. "Please, you have to believe me." He took one step forward. She stepped back. "Khalid," she whispered, "please don't do this. Please." "You don't understand," he said. Her hand hit the railing. The metal vibrated faintly under her touch. She shook her head desperately. "I'm carrying your child. Your child. Please don't." He reached for her. The terror hit her fully now. She screamed, stumbling backward, grabbing at the railing with both hands. "Stop! Stop!" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He didn't hesitate. He moved with calm precision. She clawed at his arms, nails digging deep, dragging across his skin, leaving angry red welts. She screamed again. The sound ripped from somewhere primal, her throat tearing with the effort. "Help!" she cried into the night, but the sea swallowed her voice. "Khalid, please! The baby, please!" He pried her fingers from the railing one at a time. She sobbed, shaking violently, her entire body trembling with desperation. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "I just want to live." He didn't answer. He lifted her effortlessly, her feet kicking wildly in the air, her hands clawing at his face, leaving thin lines of blood across his cheek. Her eyes locked onto his. Pure terror, pure pleading, and he pushed. Her body arced backward, hair flying, nightgown billowing like torn silk. Her scream was cut short by the wind before the sea swallowed her whole. A single splash, then nothing. The waves closed over her, smoothing like fabric being pulled tight. Within seconds, the water was calm again, as if she had never existed. He stepped forward, peering into the darkness. No movement, no sound. He wiped the scratches on his arms with a handkerchief. He wiped the railing carefully, thoroughly. When he straightened, the faintest smile touched his lips. Not joy, not triumph, just quiet satisfaction. He believed the night had ended. But the sea never erases anything. It only waits. Morning arrived quietly, soft as a sigh, the ship rolling gently over the Mediterranean as if nothing had happened. The sun climbed slowly over the horizon, bathing the symphony of the seas in pale gold. Passengers stretched awake in their suites, children ran toward breakfast buffets, and elderly couples strolled the walking track with coffee in hand. The world aboard the ship moved with its usual rhythm. Except in Suite 9083. The room was still. Too still. A robe lay draped across the bed where she left it. Her sandals rested neatly beside the dresser. Her phone charger hung from the wall, empty. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing looked wrong. But Madison wasn't there. It was housekeeping who noticed first. At 8:12 a.m., a young woman named Sophia approached the suite with her cart, humming softly. She knocked once, waited, then knocked again. No answer. Standard protocol required a third knock and a call through the door. Housekeeping? Silence. She tried the handle, locked. She marked the suite as do not disturb and moved on. It wasn't unusual. People slept in, especially on cruises. She didn't think twice. But at 9:47 a.m., the ship's guest services received a call. It was from Khalid. "My partner is missing," he said, voice calm but urgent. "She left our suite early this morning. She hasn't returned." The receptionist blinked at the composure in his tone. Partners called guest services all the time. Lost keys, forgotten IDs, arguments over excursions, but rarely did anyone sound so steady, as if he had rehearsed the words. "Can you tell me her name, sir?" "Madison Crawford," he said softly. The name meant nothing to the young receptionist. But by the end of the day, it would mean something to the entire ship. "We'll page security and begin a standard search," she said. "Please remain available." "Of course," he replied. Then he hung up. At 10:08 a.m., 2 security officers arrived at the suite. They knocked, announced themselves, and waited. When there was no response, they unlocked the door. Khalid stood inside, hands folded in front of him, expression arranged into something appropriately distressed. "She was upset last night," he said as they stepped in. "She went for air, maybe a walk. She does that sometimes." He paused, letting the words settle. "But she didn't come back." One of the officers scanned the room. Madison's belongings were still neatly arranged. A soft sweater folded across a chair, a book face down on the nightstand, a glass with fingerprints on it, a half-empty bottle of perfume. But no phone. "Did she take anything with her?" one officer asked. "No," Khalid said. "She left her purse. She didn't say where she was going." His voice trembled slightly when he spoke the last sentence. "Not too much, just enough." "Did the two of you argue?" He lowered his gaze. "She was emotional. She's been stressed. She said she needed space." It was remarkable how gently he crafted the narrative. Concern, not guilt. Sorrow, not panic. The perfect performance of a man who just wanted his partner found safe. "We'll review the overnight footage," the officer said. "In the meantime, please remain in the suite or nearby." "Of course," Khalid replied with a slow nod. "Please, find her." He said it with the exact amount of break in his voice required to seem devastated. By noon, the rumor had already crossed several floors. "Someone's missing. An American woman. Young, pretty. Wasn't she an influencer? I think she ran away. No, someone said she fell. Someone said she jumped. Someone said she was drinking. She posted travel stuff on Instagram. I follow her. @Maddie in Texas." Passengers talked in hushed tones, leaning close over their plates in the dining hall, scrolling through her account to piece together who she was. They pulled up her photos from the past year, her bright smile, her thrifted outfits, her soft captions about hope and healing and gratitude. No one knew that just hours before her final moments, she had stood barefoot on the very deck they now photographed for memories. At 1:36 p.m., guest services attempted to call Madison's listed emergency contact. They reached voicemail, then again, then again. At 2:10 p.m., a crew member tried a different number. This one answered. "Hello? Mrs. Crawford? This is she. Ma'am, this is the Symphony of the Seas calling. We're calling regarding your daughter, Madison." A long pause. The kind where the air itself seems to freeze. "What about her?" Linda asked, voice tight with sudden dread. "She hasn't been located on the ship. We're conducting a full search." A shaky inhale. I don't understand. What do you mean she hasn't been located?" "She was reported missing this morning." No, she's on vacation. She's safe. She sent me a message last week. She's okay. We are doing everything we can to locate her." Linda's breath quivered. "Put her on the phone, please. Let me talk to her." "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't reach her." The silence on the line turned to something thick, suffocating. Is her partner there?" Linda whispered. "He is cooperating with officers on board." The phrasing wasn't intentional, but the word cooperating struck her like a blow. Linda's voice cracked. "Find my daughter. Please. We're trying. Try harder." Back in Austin, Linda's hands shook so violently she dropped her phone twice. She tried calling Madison's number until her carrier stopped allowing repeated attempts. Each time the line went to voicemail. "Hey, it's Maddie. Leave a message." Her daughter's voice, bright and alive, mocked her with every replay. She called Khalid. He didn't answer. She called again. Nothing. Again. Voicemail. Again. Blocked. Her chest tightened with the kind of fear only mothers know. The fear that strikes without proof, without logic, without mercy. She pressed a hand to her mouth to quiet her sobs. By evening, she posted a plea on Facebook, then Instagram, then Twitter. "My daughter Madison is missing on a cruise ship. If anyone has seen her, Please contact me immediately. Her friends began to share the posts, then their friends, then strangers. Find Maddie, bring Maddie home, where is Madison Crawford? The hashtags started small. By sunset, they were spreading. On board, the ship's internal search teams moved systematically. They checked restaurants, lounges, casinos, the theater, the gym, every visible deck. They asked passengers if they had seen a young woman with long hair, brown eyes, wearing a white nightgown. Most just shook their heads. Others offered vague recollections that led nowhere. Security officers reviewed camera feeds from the night before. Everything seemed normal until 2:46 a.m. when Madison appeared walking beside Khalid on one deck. But the camera angle was terrible, grainy, distant, partially obstructed by an overhang from the level above. At 2:47 a.m., the footage froze. Then jumped to 2:49 a.m. A gap. Just 2 minutes. But 2 minutes mattered. 2 minutes was everything. The officers frowned, replaying it over and over. The gap appeared natural, as if the camera had reset due to low battery or routine malfunction. But it was too convenient, too perfectly placed. It's probably a technical issue, one officer said. Probably, the other replied. But neither sounded convinced. At 5:22 p.m., a helicopter arrived on the helipad with a man who stepped off with the weary precision of someone who'd spent too much of his life looking at the aftermath of other people's lives. Detective Marco Castellano. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with lines etched deeply into his forehead. A man who had seen more grief than he ever intended. He had worked maritime cases for over 13 years. He knew the sea. He knew people. And he knew that missing women rarely disappeared without a story someone didn't want told. Marco walked across the deck, escorted by 2 officers. The wind pulled at his coat as he scanned the ship, its windows, its corners, its blind spots. Where's the partner? He in their suite. Alone? Yes, Marco nodded. Good. Keep him there. He didn't ask permission. He didn't adjust his tone. He simply said the words like commands carved from stone. When Marco entered the suite, Khalid rose with gentle sorrow in his eyes, the kind that could almost fool you if you didn't know better. Detective, he said softly, please, find her. Marco's gaze lingered on him, too calm, too clean, too controlled. Tell me what happened, Marco said. Khalid lowered his head. She was upset last night. Emotional. I didn't want to leave her, but she needed space. I fell asleep. When I woke up, she was gone. Marco watched him closely. Did she say why she was upset? Stress, Khalid murmured. She'd been overwhelmed. Did she ever talk about harming herself? Khalid hesitated, not enough to seem suspicious, just enough for effect. She struggled sometimes. Marco filed that away. Convenient. Why didn't you report her missing earlier? I thought she needed time. She's gone for walks before. Another convenience. Marco nodded slowly. We'll talk again later. He left the suite without another word. Khalid exhaled softly, his shoulders sinking with practiced grief. But Marco didn't look back. He didn't need to. By early evening, the crew had finished reviewing all accessible footage. Marco sat in a small room with a single monitor, watching the same 2-minute gap repeat over and over. He leaned forward, pausing the frame at 2:46:55. He replayed it, slowed it, watched their movements. Madison's hair blowing in the wind, Khalid walking too close. She looked calm, but something in the angle of her body suggested hesitation. Marco rubbed his jaw. Where's the camera facing the opposite railing? We don't have one covering that part, the technician said. Marco nodded once. Of course you don't. He wasn't annoyed at the crew. He was annoyed because he'd seen this pattern before. Powerful men always seemed to know where shadows lived. As the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sea copper and orange, passengers gathered near the railings, watching the waves with unspoken unease. Mothers held their children closer. Women whispered to one another. Men stood in small clusters, discussing theories. Inside, a group of younger cruisers live-streamed, voices trembling with excitement and concern. Guys, there's a missing girl on our ship. She's an influencer. Maddie in Texas? I swear I saw her like 2 days ago near the pool. She was with a guy. Kinda older. I heard someone say she fell. No, someone told me she jumped. Or maybe she just ran away. I don't know, but it feels weird. Rumors grew legs, then wings. At 8:41 p.m., Linda sat on her couch in Austin clutching a framed photo of her daughter. She hadn't eaten all day. She hadn't changed out of her nightgown. She had called every number the ship provided. She had talked to authorities who told her to remain calm. She had spoken to reporters who were already circling like vultures. Madison's phone still went to voicemail. Her baby girl was gone. And Linda felt it. Not logically, not rationally, but in the way only a mother can feel the exact moment something in their world shatters. Back on the ship, Marco approached the railing where Madison had last been seen. The wind whipped across his face as he crouched down. He ran a gloved finger along the metal. Clean, too clean. He stood slowly, looking out at the sea, dark, endless, indifferent. He felt anger bloom in his chest, not the kind that raged, the kind that hardened into resolve. He turned to the nearest officer. "Something happened here," he said quietly. "How can you tell?" "Because the woman they're describing," Marco said, "didn't walk out here alone." He looked up at the camera above them. It stared back, lifeless. Marco leaned closer, eyes narrowing. And that camera didn't stop by accident. The officer swallowed. "So you think?" Marco cut him off. "I think the truth exists on this ship," he said. "Someone just doesn't want us to find it." The officer nodded nervously. Marco stepped back from the railing, hands on his hips, the sea wind whipping through his hair. He didn't know how, he didn't know where, he didn't know who would help him. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was no accident. And this was no suicide. Somewhere on this ship, a truth was breathing, and Marco was going to find it, even if he had to pry it from the shadows himself. By his third night aboard the Symphony of the Seas, Detective Marco Castellano had surrendered completely to exhaustion. But exhaustion didn't dull him, it refined him. It cut out distractions, sharpened instincts, burned away anything unnecessary. He sat hunched over a cluster of security monitors, their cold blue glow bathing his face in a sickly light. Papers were spread across the desk, half-drunk espressos lined like soldiers in retreat, and the room hummed with the low mechanical sighs of an overworked cruise ship. He hadn't slept in 70 hours. But he wasn't stopping. Not while Madison Crawford was still somewhere between the decks and the deep. Not while her story made no sense. The official footage showed nothing. The timelines were too clean. The cameras failed at the exact moment they shouldn't have. It was as if the ship itself had conspired to swallow the truth. Still, Marco had dealt with men like Khalid before. Wealthy, poised, deliberate. Men who believed their status was immunity, their charm a shield, their lies a kind of art. But Marco also knew this. Men like that always made one mistake. Always. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, eyes drifting over the ship's schematics for what felt like the 1,000th time. He traced the lines of the main deck cameras. 172, 173, 174, 175. Everything in sequence. Everything accounted for. Until a faint marking. A small annotation written in old ink. 174B. He blinked, sat forward. No, that can't be right. He flipped through the earlier revisions, scanning quickly. There it was again. Camera 174B, listed under maintenance add-ons. Not part of the primary loop. Not visible to the general security feed. Installed 6 months ago after a petty theft during a corporate charter event. A camera no one had remembered. A camera that wasn't supposed to matter. A camera the killer didn't know existed. Marco's pulse spiked. He logged into the secondary matrix, redirected a few dead channels, patched in a manual override, and waited. Static. A flicker. A frozen frame. Then, the sky deck. Tilted from an awkward angle, like a drunk camera operator had mounted it at the last second. The railing visible at the bottom corner. A slice of the deck, a sliver of the night sky. He adjusted the contrast. The timestamp burned into the corner. October 26. His breath left him in a single violent exhale. And then he saw her. Madison. White nightgown whipping in the wind. Hands trembling, gripping the railing behind her. Her face contorted not with confusion, not with sadness, but with pure survival instinct. Wide eyes, open mouth, her body bent backward as she fought against something no one had believed existed. Opposite her, stepping into frame, Khalid, composed, straight-backed, balanced. No panic, no hesitation, just calculation. Marco stared, unable to blink. His chest tightened as the scene unfolded. Madison pleaded, her hands moving rapidly, her lips forming words he couldn't hear but could almost imagine. Please. 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 Then came the moment that rearranged the entire world. Khalid reached for her. She fought. nails clawing across his forearm, dragging down his cheek. Her hair flew wildly as she screamed into the night, a sound the camera didn't capture but Marco could feel in his bones. He watched her grip the railing desperately. He watched her fingers lose their hold. He watched her body tip over the edge, arms flailing, nightgown billowing like torn wings as she plunged into darkness. 1 second. 2, 3. Then the splash, barely visible, a ghost of white foam swallowed immediately by black water. The ship sailed on, indifferent. And Khalid, he simply observed, calm, untouched, breathing evenly. Then he wiped the railing, wiped his arms, examined the scratches Madison left on him with mild irritation, like a man checking for lint on his shirt. Finally, that faint smile. Marco's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Bastardo, he whispered, the word low, guttural, pulled from a place he had long tried to bury. He remembered a night years ago, another woman, another railing, another man who thought he was untouchable. His sister's voice still haunted his dreams, pain echoed in his bones. But this time, he was seeing it in real time. He was watching the thing he had feared most happening all over again. Only now, there was proof. Cold, unforgiving, digital truth. He played the footage again, slower, then frame by frame, each flicker carved deeper into him. He watched her fall a second time, a third, a fourth. He forced himself to stop. Madison deserved a detective who could still think. Marco stood abruptly, chair rolling back into the wall. His anger didn't explode, it condensed, hardened, focused. He picked up the phone. This is Detective Castellano. Patch me directly to Italian federal authorities. Priority alert. The next 3 hours were a blur of voices, statuses, confirmations, encrypted channels. Marco sent the data through secure portals, verified its authenticity, documented the chain of custody. The footage was duplicated, time-stamped, sealed. While bureaucracy churned, another storm brewed, quietly, invisibly, and completely beyond Marco's control. Sometime between 3:12 a.m. and 4:01 a.m., a 32-second clip from camera number 174B left the ship. To this day, no one knows who leaked it. A junior crew member? A technician in the wrong room at the right time? A passenger who saw something they weren't meant to see? But it didn't matter. Because the moment the clip hit the internet, everything changed. People didn't need news anchors. They didn't need analysts. They didn't need experts to explain what they already understood instinctively. Millions of strangers watched a woman fight for her life. They watched her beg. They watched her fall. They watched the man who pushed her stand there, as if she were nothing. Across social platforms, across continents, across time zones, the clip spread like wildfire. One phone to another, one horrified whisper to the next. Within hours, every corner of social media was shaking with rage. Mothers held their daughters closer. Women told stories of the men who had made them feel unsafe. Men stared at their screens, wondering how someone who looked so composed could hide such emptiness inside. And in Austin, Texas, Linda Crawford collapsed when she saw the footage. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stared. Her daughter, her only baby, falling into darkness. Her hands trembled as she touched the screen, as if she could reach through, catch Madison before the water did, pull her back into the world. Her sobs came minutes later, raw, broken, unrestrained. The kind that splinter a person's chest from the inside. Her husband, Robert, dropped to his knees beside her, the phone shaking in his own hands. He didn't understand the mechanics of the internet, or how it got out, or who shared it. All he knew was simple, devastating truth. Their daughter didn't disappear. She didn't run. She didn't jump. She was murdered. While grief swallowed one home in Texas, panic swallowed one penthouse in Dubai. Khalid had returned there on day 3, confident he had closed every door behind him. He moved through the airport with the ease of someone who believed in his own untouchable bloodline. In his suite, he showered, shaved, visited the tailor, took business calls. He slipped back into his role as heir, as prince, as the future his father had been shaping since birth. By the evening of day 5, he was lounging on a chaise, overlooking the glittering skyline. A tray of figs and honey rested beside him. His phone buzzed with a message from his younger brother, some smug comment about their father's upcoming succession meeting. Khalid ignored it. He was untouched, unbothered, safe. Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced lazily. A message from an associate. Khalid, tell me this isn't you. Confusion creased his brow. He opened the attachment. A frozen image filled the screen. His face, Moonlit, expression calm, hand on Madison's waist. He frowned harder. Tapped again. The video played. Her screams, visible. Her struggle, undeniable. His push, irrefutable. He felt his heartbeat thud once, heavy, jarring. No sound, no narration, no commentary. Just truth. He watched himself commit murder, watched himself erase the woman who loved him, watched himself smile afterward. He stared at the screen in disbelief, then in fury. He threw the phone across the room, the screen shattering against the marble floor. His hands shook for the first time in years. Anger, not remorse. Rage, not guilt. How? He whispered. How? Because he had checked every camera. He had scouted every angle. He had memorized the blind spots. He had timed the act down to the second. He had done everything perfectly. Except one thing. He didn't know about camera number 174B. He didn't know about the one guardian eye that had been added after a petty theft 6 months ago. He didn't know about the angle that caught the corner of the railing. He didn't know about the technician who had forgotten to disconnect it from the maintenance server. He had planned everything, but the universe had planned something else. Marco Castellano replayed the footage for the 10th time, each viewing adding steel to his spine. Khalid saw only a camera. Marco saw justice, because the prince had missed one blind spot, and that blind spot was the crack that split his empire open. Under mounting international pressure, and with evidence too damning for diplomacy to soften, Italian authorities secured Khalid's extradition. A guarded transport plane left Dubai in the early hours before sunrise, its cabin stripped of all luxury, its windows shuttered. By the time the aircraft touched down in Rome, the illusion of his untouchable life had already begun to unravel. The man who once traveled the world in private jets now stepped onto the tarmac as a detainee, wrists bound, headed toward a courtroom that his family could no longer shield him from. The trial began on a cold morning in Rome, the kind of morning where the sky looked bruised and tired, as if even the weather understood the weight of what was about to unfold. Outside the courthouse, the crowd stretched across the cobblestones. Tourists, activists, grieving strangers, journalists holding microphones like weapons. The air buzzed with a strange mix of outrage and reverence. No one there had known Madison Crawford personally, yet it felt as if they had all met her through the screen. Her smile, her soft hope, the way she tried to find beauty in small things. Inside, metal detectors beeped, security dogs paced, and officers whispered into radios, preparing for a trial that would be broadcast across nearly every continent. A high-profile foreign national accused of murdering a young American woman. A prince, standing before a justice system he believed he stood above. A courtroom bracing for a story so violent, so intimate, and so deeply human, that even the most seasoned officials felt something heavy in their chests. The wooden doors swung open at 9:03 a.m. And there he was. Khalid entered wearing a charcoal suit, tailored so precisely it might as well have been molded to his body. His tie was straight, his posture regal, his expression carved into a mask of calm disdain. He walked with the confidence of a man who had been raised to believe that consequences were optional, that power was a blanket that would always keep him warm. Whispers rippled across the courtroom. The cameras shifted toward him, like flowers bending toward the sun. But unlike the sun, he offered no warmth, only cold arrogance, the kind that seeped into the bones of everyone watching. He took his seat beside his defense attorney, crossed one leg over the other, and smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his sleeve. He didn't look around. He didn't acknowledge the crowd. He didn't acknowledge the judge. He seemed more annoyed than afraid, as if someone had inconvenienced him with paperwork, not murder charges. This, he believed, was nothing more than a temporary detour. He was wrong. The prosecutor, Alessandra Ferretti, stood slowly, a woman in her 40s with dark hair pulled back into a tight bun and eyes that held years of unspoken stories. She had prosecuted violent men before, but never one with this level of global attention. Never one who walked into the courtroom as if he still expected applause. Before she spoke, she looked toward the gallery. Linda Crawford sat there clutching a blue handkerchief, her eyes swollen from nights of crying she could no longer count. She had traveled from Texas, supported by neighbors, strangers, and donations from people who believed her daughter deserved justice louder than the world's excuses. Alessandra nodded at her, a small gesture of solidarity, then turned toward the jurors. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady, "you will hear arguments in this courtroom. You will hear claims, doubts, theories meant to distract you. But I want you to remember only one truth. A young woman fought for her life, and the man who claimed to love her watched her fall into the sea." She let the silence breathe, let it settle. This trial is not about politics. It is not about culture. It is not about wealth. It is about a crime, a violent crime, a crime witnessed by the one eye he didn't expect. Her gaze slid toward Khalid. Cameron, a 174B, felt like a ghost sitting in the courtroom with them. Khalid's defense attorney rose shortly after, pacing theatrically before the jury. He spoke about misinterpretation, about public hysteria, about an influencer seeking emotional validation. He called Madison fragile, easily overwhelmed, volatile. He framed Khalid as a devoted partner, trying to soothe a troubled young woman. When he referred to her as an opportunist who built a career on curated vulnerability, the courtroom gasped. Linda's hand clutched her chest, and in the back row, someone whispered, "How dare he?" Khalid didn't react. He didn't defend Madison's name. He remained still, his eyes drifting lazily toward the ceiling as though bored by his own trial. What he didn't realize was this. Every second he acted unbothered. He sharpened the blade the prosecutor would soon drive through the heart of his defense. Then came the evidence. One by one, the pieces of Madison's life were laid bare. Her phone logs, her messages, her private journal entries, written in fragile, slanted handwriting. A technician dimmed the courtroom lights as the overhead projector illuminated the first text. "I just want him to be proud of me. I want to make him happy." A woman in the second row began to cry softly. Another message appeared. "If this baby ruins his life, I'll leave. I don't want to be a burden." Then another. "I just hope he doesn't hate me." The jurors shifted uncomfortably, each message pulling them deeper into Madison's fear. Alessandra spoke softly as each text flickered onto the screen. "These are not the words of an opportunist," she said. "These are the words of a woman trying to protect the man she loved. A woman who offered him silence, distance, secrecy, and sacrifice. A woman who believed her own disappearance would be a gift to him." In the gallery, Linda trembled. Her daughter had died believing love was a burden she should carry alone. Then came Madison's journal. It was small, leather-bound, worn at the edges. The prosecutor held it gently, almost reverently. She opened it to a page dated 1 week before the cruise. "I never thought someone like him would choose someone like me. I know we can never be public. I know I'm not part of his world. But he makes me feel safe, and I've never had that before. If this is the only kind of love I ever get, it's enough." The silence in the courtroom bled into the walls. A juror pressed a tissue against his eyes. Another stared fixedly at the journal, as if trying to memorize every loop of her handwriting. Only one person remained unmoved. Khalid. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest. If anything, he looked irritated, like a man forced to listen to a long, uninteresting lecture. That indifference would come back to destroy him. Then, the moment no one in the courtroom was ready for. The lights dimmed again. The judge warned the gallery that the footage was graphic. Linda gripped Robert's hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. And then Cameron, a 174B, appeared. Grainy, angled, unforgiving. On the screen, Madison stepped backward, wind whipping her hair. Her body trembled with fear so raw it radiated through every pixel. Her hands reached forward, pleading, bargaining. And then, the push. Her scream was silent, but people heard it anyway. They felt it in their bones. Her fall unfolded frame by frame, as though the camera itself refused to look away. When her white nightgown disappeared into the Black Sea, Linda collapsed forward, sobbing into her husband's shoulder. Reporters turned away. A juror covered her mouth to stifle a cry. The courtroom seemed to tilt, grief pressing down like gravity itself. And still, Khalid didn't blink, not once. When the lights came back on, a strange heaviness hung in the air. Not just sadness, not just horror, certainty. The defense attorney rose slowly, as if hoping the floor might swallow him before he had to speak. And then came the verdict. It took the jury less than 4 hours, remarkably fast for an international trial of this magnitude. The judge returned to the bench. The gallery held its collective breath. The jury forewoman stood. We find the defendant guilty. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone cried out. Linda bowed her head and clutched her hands together, whispering something through tears. Maybe, thank you. Maybe, I love you. Maybe, you can rest now. But the forewoman wasn't done. Guilty of premeditated murder. Guilty of destruction of evidence. Guilty of obstruction of justice. Guilty of aggravated homicide with special circumstances. Each statement struck the air like a hammer. Khalid remained perfectly still, blinking once, twice. Then, life without parole. Something ruptured inside him. He shot up from his seat, knocking over his chair, shouting in a voice that cracked with disbelief and rage. Do you know who I am? You cannot do this to me. I am a prince. I am heir to an empire. You have no right. He slammed his fists against the defense table. Officers surged forward. He shoved one, nearly toppling him. Another officer grabbed his arm, and Khalid jerked violently, shouting curses in multiple languages. His mask shattered, revealing the panic beneath. The gallery recoiled, horrified. This was the man Madison had faced alone on the edge of a ship. This was the man she had begged for her life. And suddenly, everything made sense. He didn't rage because he was innocent. He raged because the world dared to say he wasn't untouchable. 4 officers wrestled him back, cuffing his wrists. His expensive suit crumpled as he fell to his knees, still screaming, still insisting he had a right to walk free. No one listened, not anymore. When they finally dragged him from the courtroom, still shouting, still thrashing, Linda stood. Her legs shook, but she stood with a steadiness that came from somewhere deeper than strength. As Khalid was pulled past her, she looked at him with an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't hatred, just a grief so vast it seemed to hollow the space around her. Quietly, almost tenderly, she said, My daughter would have raised your baby with love. She would have carried your secret to her grave. And you threw her away like she was nothing. Khalid stopped struggling, just for a second. Then the officers pulled him forward, and he disappeared beyond the doors. And for the first time since Madison fell into the sea, Linda felt the air leave her lungs, not from pain, but from release. In that courtroom, power had finally met consequence. A prince had been stripped to nothing but a man in a suit, screaming into a void that no longer cared. He killed for legacy, and lost the very future he murdered to protect. Austin wakes gently. The mornings here rarely rush. Sunlight crawls slowly over rooftops, stretches across quiet porches, and finally drapes itself across the old live oaks that line the cemetery on South Lamar. Their branches sway just enough to sound like whispers, comforting, familiar, almost like a mother's hand brushing hair out of a sleeping child's eyes. It is beneath one of these live oaks that Linda Crawford kneels every Sunday. She comes early, always before the church bells ring, always before the groundskeeper starts his rounds. She carries the same things each time, a small bouquet of bluebonnets when the season allows, a warm cloth to wipe away dust from the granite, and a thermos of coffee she never drinks. She sets everything down gently, as if the grave could feel kindness. Madison's gravestone sits low to the ground, simple, unpretentious, just like the girl who once decorated her thrift store dresses with handwritten quotes. The stone reads, Madison Grace Crawford, 1994 to 2023. She deserved the world. She gave the world her kindness. This morning, Linda brushes a thumb across the carved letters. Morning, baby, she whispers, voice catching on the word baby. I brought the good coffee today, the one you used to sneak from the kitchen, even though you swore you hated anything bitter. She tries to laugh. It comes out broken. The cemetery is empty except for a gardener trimming hedges in the distance, his movements slow and respectful. Birds hop across the grass, unbothered. The air smells faintly of cedar and dew. Linda adjusts her knee on the earth and exhales, letting the quiet settle around her. It's been months since the verdict, months since she sat in a courtroom with her heart held together by threads, waiting for justice to speak. Months since she watched a man with royal blood scream as guards dragged him away. And yet grief doesn't recognize calendars. It lives in cycles, in waves, in pockets, in little pinpricks that stab when you least expect them. Today is one of those days. She pulls out her phone, unlocking the screen with shaking hands. She scrolls to a photo she keeps in a special folder. It's one Madison took herself, sunlight dancing across her freckles, smile small and shy, hair blowing wildly across her face. A moment captured before her world intersected with a man who would ultimately destroy it. "Your foundation got another donation yesterday," Linda whispers. $2,000. Anonymous. "People still care, Maddie. They still say your name. They still write about you, pray for you, cry for you. You change strangers, sweet girl. You change the whole world without even meaning to." She wipes her eyes. The foundation, the Maddie Grace Foundation, was born out of the global wave that surged after the footage leaked. Strangers from every corner of the internet donated, often with messages from women who had survived their own silent wars. "Your story gave me the courage to leave. I saw myself in her. She saved me without knowing me." The money funded escape programs, legal aid, shelter beds, and emergency travel for women caught in dangerous relationships. Madison never knew her light would shine the brightest after she was gone. But Linda made sure it did. She made sure her daughter's life wasn't reduced to a headline or a cautionary tale. "You didn't die for nothing," Linda whispers. "God knows I wish you hadn't died at all. But you didn't die for nothing." She swallows hard and presses her palm against the warm stone. "We got him, sweet girl. The world knows now. And he'll never hurt anyone again." For a long time, she stays like that. Hand on the grave, eyes closed, breathing slowly. The wind picks up, stirring leaves around her feet. It feels like a familiar touch, gentle and soft. A mother's heart learns to hold on to even the smallest signs. After a while, she stands, brushing dirt from her jeans. She places the bouquet of bluebonnets carefully at the base of the stone and tucks a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I'll be back next Sunday," she whispers. "I love you more than you ever knew." She lingers for one last moment, then turns and begins the slow walk back to her car, each step heavy with memory. An ocean away, the air inside Volterra prison is cold enough to bite. The walls here are thick, stone slabs that have seen centuries of men pacing, praying, plotting, unraveling. The corridors echo with footsteps and metal clacks and the occasional angry shout that bounces off the concrete like a warning. Khalid moves through the hallway with none of the presents he once carried. The tailored suits are gone, the polished shoes gone. The possessor of power, name, lineage, gone. His prison-issued clothes hang loosely on him now. His hair is longer, unruly. His once perfect posture curves slightly, as if the weight of his new world has settled on his spine. He keeps his eyes low, not out of humility, but because he has learned, slowly, painfully, that eye contact here is an invitation to violence. And here men like him do not get to decline invitations. A guard follows at a distance, not to protect Khalid, to prevent him from being killed before the justice system finishes its job. Inmates despise many things, but a man who murders a pregnant woman sits at the bottom of the moral food chain. Every whisper he hears as he walks feels like the edge of a blade. Prince, Hero de Mierda, baby killer. Let's see if royalty bleeds the same. The guards don't intervene. Not anymore. They simply keep him alive enough to face each day. His cell is small, barely enough space for a cot, a sink, and a toilet bolt to the floor. The window is a narrow slit near the ceiling, letting in only a sliver of light, no matter the hour. At night, the darkness inside the walls feels like a stone dropped into his chest. This is where he spends most of his time. He sits on the cot, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. Sometimes he stares at the wall for hours, unblinking, as if waiting for it to open and lead him back to the world he destroyed. But the world has moved on without him. He doesn't receive letters. His father has disowned him. His mother has retreated into silence, unwilling to face the shame. His brother, now the heir he tried to prevent, hasn't spoken his name since the trial. Even former business associates treat him like a stain they cannot afford to acknowledge. He is alone. And alone with memories is the worst kind of punishment. He thinks of Madison only in flashes, not the moments of affection, not the dinners, not the vacations, only that night. That railing, that scream he pretends he didn't hear, the scratches on his arm that faded within days but remain visible in his nightmares. And the camera. That camera. He has replayed the footage 1,000 times in his mind, not because he regrets it, but because he still cannot understand how he missed it. He thought he had studied every angle. He thought he had outsmarted the ship, the night, the sea, even fate itself. But he forgot the one truth that has echoed through every floor of this prison. Someone is always watching. Far from the cold walls of Volterra and the quiet cemetery in Austin, the Symphony of the Seas glides across blue water again, carrying families, honeymooners, retirees, adventure seekers. New passengers stroll the decks where old stories linger. They sip cocktails. They take photos. They laugh under the same sky where Madison breathed her last. Most have no idea what happened here months before, but some do. Every now and then, a passenger stops at the sky deck railing. They stare at the water a little too long, hold their phone a little too tightly, look around as though they can feel a presence. They whisper to each other about the girl from Texas, the one whose story broke the internet, the one whose fall became a global cry for change. But it is not the railing that holds the past, it is the lens above it. Camera number 174B. The forgotten one, the misnumbered one, the one no one bothered to remove. It remains bolted to the helipad structure, humming quietly, blinking its small red light into the night. Its angle still imperfect, its frame still slightly crooked. But its view is uncompromising. It watches every shadow that moves across the deck, every couple holding hands, every child running past, every woman leaning against the railing to feel the wind. It sees everything. The camera does not sleep, does not forget, does not lie. It is a silent witness on a ship that once tried to hide a crime, but instead became the vessel for its own confession. And sometimes, late at night, when the deck is empty and the ocean grows restless, the camera's faint mechanical hum feels almost alive. Almost like a vow. No one will vanish like her again. Not on this ship, not in that blind spot. Not while the world watches. The chapter of justice does not wipe away grief. It doesn't bring Madison back. It doesn't stitch the ripped edges of her life or fill the empty chair at her mother's table. But justice, when it comes, does something else. It speaks. It tells the world what happened. It gives the victim her voice back. It stamps truth where lies once tried to root. And in the end, truth is what exposes the darkness. Truth is what saved Madison's story. He thought power could erase truth. But truth had already pressed record. Justice came late, but it came. Before we end this story, before we let the final frame fade into the quiet of whatever room you're sitting in, I want to speak directly to you, the person still here. The person who stayed all the way to the end, who felt something in their chest when Madison fell, who carried the weight of her voice long after the screen went still. Stories like hers aren't just cases. They're warnings, they're mirrors. They're reminders of how fragile trust can be and how easily a good heart can walk into the wrong pair of arms. If this story touched you, even for a moment, I'm asking you gently to help keep her light alive. Not with money, not with anything heavy, just with a simple act that takes a second but echoes far beyond the screen. Tap the like button. Subscribe if you want more stories told with honesty, empathy, and respect. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be ignoring red flags. Someone who believes danger always happens to someone else. Someone who might need the reminder that silence protects the wrong people. Thank you for staying. Thank you for caring. And thank you for watching. See you on the next one.